What is art? What is art? This is the question I'll be asking today on this episode of the House of Decline podcast. Obviously, the question, what is art, is broad and difficult to answer, and not really helpful in terms of there's no real practical or good answer to it. You know, the boundaries are constantly closing in and moving out and being redefined over years and years. But I find, like, personally, if you are an artist or somebody that is trying to do creative work, you know, even if it's to the very silly capacity that I do creative work, I think it's useful to ask yourself this question a lot, because in defining your own creative work, having sort of rules or limits of what you will and won't do, even if they're totally arbitrary, do end up help shaping your creative output, I believe. I think assigning arbitrary rules to yourself in a way, counterintuitively, can end up making you more creative. And these rules can be through craft, you know, you only adhere to a certain medium. It can be through philosophy, you won't depict a certain thing, or you only depict a certain thing, or, you know, these are large, you know, sweeping examples. But I think every artist makes these decisions for themselves about, you know, what do they think is within the limits or bounds of art, and how can I work to live up to that. To use an example in literature, I always thought this was a great bit in Hunter x Hunter. I always thought it was a great self-commentary on the artwork of Togashi himself, because in Hunter x Hunter, the way the power system, it's sort of a shonen manga power system, but it's very sort of unique and elaborate. But part of the rules of the Nen system is that putting rules or strictures on your use of your power makes your power more powerful. Which I always, in my mind, I interpreted that as similar to this philosophy of, you know, creativity that I've assembled. Maybe that's a totally arbitrary connection, but I'm making it anyway. But yeah, and obviously, you know, these rules don't have to hold fast. You can change them from one day to the next. But, you know, thinking about what you philosophically want out of art, what you want it to represent, how it makes you feel, what is its purpose, you know, these are all things you should be constantly thinking about. They have no one answer, and that answer is always subject to change. But when you're thinking about them, I think you'll enhance your own artwork. Even if you're not an artist, even in everything you do, you know, I think thinking about the moral and personal and aesthetic and practical limits of what you do always behooves you, no matter what it is. So art, of course, in its broadest sense, is, you know, any creative or act that involves some sort of craft or development of craft. You know, it can be put in there. You know, even sports, you know, you could consider sports an art, because it is about the development of a craft. Even though it's a game, it does have the same ability to emotionally communicate ideas in the way that artwork does. You know, if you've watched a sports game, if you follow the freaking Minnesota Vikings, the John Boy's Minnesota Vikings series, you see the, you know, the agony of their persistence and defeat, and how, you know, they were a team with an actual, you know, they had philosophy behind them. The Bud Grant philosophy is what sort of empowered the Purple People Eaters of the 70s. And so it was a, you know, there's something to the idea of sports teams taking on that sort of communicative and expressive aspect of art. But, you know, you could extend that definition even further into, like, I don't know, medicine. You know, they call it the medical arts, of course. But, you know, there is some sort of qualitative craft or practice that occurs with medicine as well, which sort of brings it into that world. It's more... I think this is where we see the limits of art. Something that has a practical purpose or an end goal feels less like art. Famously, in his Video Games Aren't Art essay, Roger Ebert said something about said something to the effect of the fact that video games have a goal. They can be beat. There's a purpose to it, takes it out of the realm of art and puts it into game, you know, and you could analogize that to sports as well. Well, I don't think this is correct. Obviously, you know, I think video games are art. I think Ebert, had he been given a few more, who cares? But I think there is a seed of truth in there. There is something about there being a practical purpose or an ulterior motive behind art, where the purpose isn't just the communication of an emotional idea, but rather something to be achieved or attained besides the communication itself, to win something, or to, in the case of advertising, which is what the rest of this episode is going to be dedicated to, is about exploiting you, there's some sort of goal other than the purpose of expressive communication, which somehow wrests it from the realm of art and puts it into the realm of something else. Maybe content is a good word for this. Something that does involve creativity and craft, but is ultimately designed less to communicate and more to get you to buy something else. To exploit you is another way of putting it. I've been watching a lot of Mad Men recently, because Mad Men is like one of my favorite shows. It's the fucking best. If you've never watched Mad Men, you should watch Perfect. A wonderful, perfect show. Every season is good. But I guess I'll spoil some stuff, but pretty minor spoilers, because this has nothing to do with the plot. All you need to know is, if you haven't seen Mad Men, there's Don Draper, who's the suave, handsome, womanizing, difficult, sort of temperamental, but brilliant creative director at Sterling Cooper. And early on in the season, he takes on a young woman. She gets promoted to copywriter. She's named Peggy. She used to be a secretary. Peggy, she's really smart. She does well for herself. She's a brilliant copywriter as well. And at first she's just like grateful for the opportunity, but over the course of time, as her talents develop, she starts developing sort of a sense of right and wrong. What is it I'm doing? Am I doing something well? Don struggles with this as well. He's always having visions of his father, saying you don't really do anything practical, or he admits to people that his worst fear is that he's not really done anything with his life. He is sort of aware that while he is proud and dedicated to his craft, he's aware that what he produces is sort of this transitory thing that, it's something that doesn't represent the depth of art. And there's one, very telling scene in my mind, where sort of Peggy's complaining about something. I forget the exact context, but Dawn says to her, she's like worried about the integrity of her work, essentially, and Dawn says to her, "We're not artists, Peggy, we solve problems." And that's very interesting to me. That sort of, that phrase again, we're not artists, we solve problems, Well, advertising does involve art, there is artwork involved, there is something beyond the communicative aspect of the artwork that takes it out of the realm of something that you could consider art. And that is the fact that there is a practical purpose. There is a monetary capitalist purpose at the core of it, which is really the true purpose of it. The true purpose of it is not exclusively to communicate an idea, but rather the communication of that idea is in service of getting you to purchase something. It is, it cares less about enriching your experience as a human, or it cares about that in as much as it can then later exploit you. And, we can acknowledge pure advertising like this. I think, even within our pieces of art in the mainstream era, mainstream film era, anything like a Disney movie or like a big blockbuster also has the ulterior motive of exploiting you. There's sort of a very telling quote from Michael Eisner in the 80s when he took over Disney. I think I learned this from a Lindsay Ellis video, but it's very telling. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he says something to the effect of, our goal is to make money, not to make quality movies necessarily. It just so happens that quality movies make money, which is why we're going to make quality movies, which is it's a very funny outlook. It's a very funny way to get to the idea of, producing something of emotional or social import. We're going to do something good for the cash, which is, I guess I like that attitude more than we'll just do something bad for the cash. We'll just, try and rip and run people and produce low quality cultural artifacts for cash. I guess that is I'd rather have good quality products than bad quality products, but there is still, at the heart of it, there is that little seed of exploitation. Well, like a mainstream Disney film is like, I don't know if you could quantify, these are arbitrary numbers, but like, it's like 70% communication and 30% exploitation of you and your children, who will see all the little toyetic things in the movie and want to buy, and they'll force you to because you love them and they got big eyes, and they don't have cash, so they can't buy it for themselves. But all the Marvel movies have this, and the toyetic quality has extended just beyond children. It's because now a huge portion of the adult population collects toys. It's not a huge portion, but enough that you want to make everything toyetic now. If you don't know the word toyetic, it's a great fucking word. I love this word because it describes so much of our commerce, especially with mainstream blockbuster films. Is toyetic, I'm quoting from the Wikipedia because I'm very, very fancy like that, is a term referring to the suitability of a media property, such as a cartoon or movie, for merchandising tie-in lines of licensed toys, games, and novelties. The term is attributed to Bernard Loomis, a toy development executive for Kenner, in discussing the opportunities for marketing the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which Steven Spielberg said the movie was not toyetic enough. Yeah, it's definitely not. What are you going to have, a little playset of Richard Dreyfuss making the mashed potatoes? And, of course, Star Wars was an extremely toyetic movie, which was the counterexample. Yeah, and toyetic is interesting because it always speaks to, like, that deep core of exploitation. The movie isn't enough. The fact that it communicated something to you wasn't enough. There has to be something else to buy. There has to be some other avenue to get your cash. It's not enough. The reason why we want you to develop an emotional relationship with this movie is because then you are way more likely to spend a lot of money on it. And if we sort of make it bright and candy-colored and, full of that sort of a lost innocence that we've all been yearning for, then, boy howdy, it'll get its hooks in you, and you'll want to buy those fucking products. And thus we come to Barbie, a movie I just saw. It's great. It's a really good movie. It's really funny. It's like wall-to-wall gags. That's what I really like about it. More than anything else, it's just joke. Very high jokes per minute ratio. And tons of them hit, too. This is a movie that is marketed towards sort of... it seems like it's like 12 and up is sort of the main thing. Those are the people who will get the most out of the sort of more adult references. But also, I don't know, I could see like an 8-year-old really enjoying this, because I watched like The Simpsons when I was like 7 or 8 years old, and half of the adult stuff, most of the stuff flew over my head. I just liked it because it was a cartoon. And I'm sure, there are probably 7 or 8-year-olds who will watch this movie, even though there's like, it ends on a pussy joke. It ends with a pussy joke, which is great. It's a great pussy joke. I love it. Spoilers for Barbie, by the way. I'm sorry about spoiling the fact that Barbie ends with a pussy joke. And it's a really good pussy joke, too. They knocked that fucking pussy joke out of the park. I got it. Love that joke. But yeah, so wall-to-wall laughs, very, like, the emotional sequences are genuinely affecting, and that's when sort of the sort of darkness, I don't want to go too far, but there are these, the movie is mostly gags, to its credit. It's 80% gags, it's just dense with them. It also feels like it's also crossing off a checklist for various products that they had to advertise and a bunch of rules that Mattel gave them, and they're doing it in like expertly clever ways that I can't imagine that like brainstorming session where like Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach are, you know, they're like, we have this list of 150 fucking demands from Mattel. How are we gonna put it in there? But the thing is, the movie is an ad. It is a very long ad, and you know the movie acknowledges this. I think that's really what the movie does. It's a masterclass in lampshading. And if you don't know what lampshading is when you use a cliche in a piece of artwork. It's okay to use that cliche if you draw attention to it. That's if you like say something like, well, that happened, but then you say, isn't that like something that assholes say? You know, suddenly your use of the cliche becomes subverted, and you've done this meta-awareness thing that endears the audience to you, because it's like, hey, we acknowledge that's a cliche too. It understands how we feel. And every second of this movie is that. Every second of this movie is like, we know, they're always looking at the camera. It's like, we know we're an ad, but isn't this fun? You know, and, you know, they pull off 100 successful jokes with this, which is, you know, frankly amazing to me. It's really like, the fact that they're so able to consistently hit these like really successful, and you know, part of the Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling are you know, perfect in it. They're really good actors. They do their job well. But yeah, so it's always this lampshading. It's always this turning towards the audience and saying, you know, we have a meta awareness of what this is that makes it okay. And I mean, that's what advertising is. That's what they say in Mad Men. That's what Dawn says. It's what advertising is to let you know you're okay. You're okay. You're okay for liking Barbie. You're okay for liking Barbie. Don't you want a Barbie? Don't you want a Barbie? You're okay for liking it. You know? And that's what I find sort of interesting about the movie, too, is it so clearly shows like the demos that it's going after in terms of its marketing, because it the premise of the movie is Barbie discovers existentialism because she's bound to a real world person who's playing with her. In this case, it's America Ferrara, and she has sort of a strained relationship with her daughter, and her daughter's this sort of stereotypical sort of goth woke tween who's very negative, and down she calls Barbie a fascist. One of the funniest jokes in the movie. It's been memed to death, where she says, I'm not a fascist. I don't control the railways or the flow of car. You know? And what's funny is like all of these jokes shouldn't work, because a lot of these jokes are sort of these recitations of feminist theory. Like they're just, you know, I guess it works every time because it's the absurdity of a Barbie, you know, reciting rapid feminist theory at you. It is like, that's it, you know? It's a funny joke. It's a good joke. It works. But yeah, it's weird to me that this Sasha character, the little girl character, this sort of goth tween, it's like Mattel, it feels like Mattel gave Greta Gerwig, okay, we're losing the goth tweens. You gotta make them feel okay about Barbies, okay? This is who we're going for. We also want to make adult women feel okay about playing with Barbies as well. And it felt very interesting to me because I keep imagining this fictional, you know, cigar smoking Mattel executive in my head. It's like, okay, we got old men playing. We got men in their 30s and 40s playing with action figures again. They're buying Funko Pops again. But you know who's not playing with dolls? Women in 30s and their 40s. How do we get them to play with dolls again? I was like, we gotta make a movie that shows that they have an emotional relationship to dolls. It's perfect. We'll get Greta Gerwig to direct it. She did Little Women. Everyone likes Little Women. Yeah, it's very interesting to me in that respect, because this Sasha character first starts out sort of you know, cynical and damaged and, you know, woke, and she's always you know, doing the sort of Gen Z political commentary throughout the whole movie. But at the end of the movie, she eventually comes around to Barbie. She's not allowed to hold on to her cynicism. No one is allowed to hold on to their cynicism because, I guess that would make for a shitty movie. No one would want to see that. You wouldn't want to buy the product if, the kid was still uninspired after seeing Barbie Land. But that always strikes. By the end of the movie, she's shed her black clothing and she wears pink now. And that, I don't know, that felt mildly disturbing to me. in some ways. It's okay to like Barbie. You're okay for liking Barbie. It really, there's even like a montage at the end of the movie which felt directly out of like the Wheel episode of Mad Men, where Don is infusing this this Kodak slide projector with his emotional moments of family memories, and he's explaining it so well that all of the Kodak executives are openly weeping in the meeting. And, he's saying stuff like, nostalgia is a pain that you can never go back to. And carousel allows it. I can't do a good John Hamm impression. Nick Mullen does a very good John Hamm impression. I can't do a good John Hamm impression. But, yeah, he says, he talks in these words of how we, like, emotionally connect to objects. That's sort of a big theme throughout the show, is understanding that people form these emotional connections with these brands. They mentioned Warhol once in the show at like some pretentious art show. It's like, why would anyone comment on advertising after Warhol? Which I don't know if that was, them going back at their critics. But, that was like a lot of Warhol was this, the Campbell soup cans are about how we form these sort of weird spiritual connections to brands, and by presenting them as art, you sort of subverted and elevated into, you take away the pretense of it exploiting you, even though Warhol was pretty exploitative, and you just take the emotional resonance of that advertising. In Warhol's case, it was the memory of, being fed Campbell's soup as a child, which is part of that emotional resonance of that brand recognition. And they do that all throughout Mad Men. So, and eventually it comes to a head in one episode. Don is, these are spoilers for Mad Men as well. In one episode, Don is shot up with speed, and he's shot up with one of the John F. Kennedy speed cocktails. And, he goes on a crazy ass meth binge, and he's not making any sense. And he's trying to find this one ad back from 1958 because he believes that it will unlock the key to all of advertising. And even on his meth binge, he says something to the effect of like, what is an ad? But, it's time you take in between your entertainment. It's the little tithe you pay for your entertainment. But what if the ad, and he doesn't quite get to this. It isn't phrased that way. But what if the ad becomes the thing, the pursuit of emotional resonance? What if the ad itself is the thing that provides you with the entertainment, or the thing that, allows you to, get into the past and get to your true longing or desire. In Don's case, the ad he finds is an ad of a mother giving food to her child because just what he needs, which goes to Don's fucked up relationship with matriarchal with mothers, and which I won't go too far into. You should discover that in your own if you haven't watched Mad Men yet. But I think this idea is very, Don, there was a meme going around before the Barbie movie came out of Don Draper scrutinizing a movie, and it said, me when I watched the Barbie movie. But I think, Don Draper would be in awe of the fucking Barbie movie. I think this is the absolute fruition of Don Draper's meth-addled dream. It is the ultimate ad because it manages to make you forget it's an ad through the constant lamp shading, or make you not care that it's an ad through the constant, like, good, well-executed jokes and constant lamp shading. And it also manages to have these moments of, like, real, like, genuine resonance that bonds you to the emotional quality of what Barbie is, or what Barbie can mean to you if you experience Barbie in an emotional way. Like, there's only like three real pauses in the movie where the jokes stop, and they're very noticeable. One is where Barbie gains sentience, essentially. She's on a bench, and she's just sort of taking in the world and noticing the emotions and conflicts of the world around her, and eventually ends with her turning to an elderly woman, and her genuinely smiling and saying, "You're so beautiful." And the woman says, "I know that." And, she is overwhelmed by the beauty of this world, because all she experienced was essentially this life where she didn't really have free will. It's sort of, it's an innocence to experience narrative, and one that I think is directly marketed at the Sashas in the audience. Is like, hey, you're a tween, you're a 12-year-old girl, you're probably going through some stuff right now. You're developing agency and sort of seeing the fucked upness, but also the majesty and the beauty of this world and taking it all in. So I think that is sort of like really designed to speak to that demographic. But it's a really Greta Gerwig, she used her whole fucking ass for this movie. She really did a really great fucking job. So many great visual set pieces. At one point, it turns into a Busby Berkeley fucking musical dance number. So many weird references. Like, I thought from the trailers when it would get to the real world, like, the production design would get less interesting. But no, there's a scene where they're at the Mattel headquarters, and it's great. There are all these, like, great, wacky, like, Seussian set pieces. And that's where, at the Mattel headquarters, that's where the second pause in the... in the story takes, the second emotional sort of weepy moment, where Barbie discovers a room in the Mattel building which is occupied by Ruth Handler, who's later confirmed in the movie to be the ghost of Ruth Handler, which is a very funny gag, I gotta say. But this is, for Barbie, this is meeting God, right? She's meeting God. she meets God, or she meets or the Oracle, some sort of overseeing, benevolent, matriarchal figure. There's also another reference to the Matrix in this movie, where she has to choose between the heel and the Birkenstock from a lesbian-coded weird Barbie played by Kate McKinnon. So she visits Ruth Handler, played by Rhea Perlman, who's like, it's funny to see Rhea Perlman cast as this sort of angelic archetype when, previously know her as Carla Tortelli, the sharp-tongued Cheers waitress, but now I guess as a grandma she's ascended into this sort of comforting status, and she does a great job. I am comforted by Rhea Perlman. I love Rhea Perlman. She's great. And casting her was a really good idea, to cast her as Ruth Handler, who has this conversation with Barbie early on in the film, where it is this sort of oracle from the Matrix sequence, where she's in this kitchen and they're sort of having this abstract conversation about how she's changed and what she was doesn't really exist anymore, and how that's existentially terrifying. But Ruth Handler reassures her, and then Barbie goes on, and then it's jokes. The conflict in the movie is Ken discovers patriarchy and turns Barbie Land into patriarchy, because he was sort of taken for granted by the Barbies as just a figure. They give Ken his moment too, but he's largely a comical villain. His problems aren't really taken seriously, because it wouldn't be funny if it was genuinely, the movie wouldn't be as snappy and funny. I'm glad they don't take Ken's problems seriously, because that's, I mean, they do, but not as much as they take Barbie's problem seriously, where she's given real moments of, like, genuine emotional pause, where the movie slows down and the shots become all soft focusy, and, shit gets a little real. And, like, the third emotional moment comes right at the end, where Barbie chooses agency, and she wants to become part of the real world. She enters a white void with Rhea Perlman, after Rhea Perlman, as Ruth Handler, reveals herself as the creator. And it's actually quite an affecting message, because Barbie wants to be a real person. She chooses the desire, because what Rhea Perlman says to her as Ruth Handler, if you're an idea, you live forever. But Barbie chooses death. she wants to become human. She wants to die. She wants to become messy because she sees it as more significant, which is, very funny. She chooses art over advertising. She chooses sort of something death-related and messy and awful and imperfect because that is the thing that creates meaning. You can't create meaning as an idea, but you can create meaning as a person, which the movie, I think that's almost a direct quote from the movie. She wants to be the one that makes meaning. And then she sees this big, Don Draper fantasy sequence of every woman in the world growing up and, experiencing joy and sadness and laughter and togetherness, and all the women are coming together, and it's this, and all the women are Barbie too, and you can be human as well, but also, buy these Barbies as well, so you have this sort of tension where it's like you can choose to be anything, but also suddenly it's like, if you buy this product saying that you can choose to be anything, and the movies, it's saying that to you constantly while also reminding you that it's saying that to you constantly, so you feel like you're clever for the movie paying tribute to you understanding it's an ad. And I don't know, I think in these emotional moments, you don't notice you're being sold something as much during the gags because they're genuinely amusing and because they're slight. You don't have to take it seriously. The movie is not asking you to take it seriously. But during these genuinely emotional moments, the movie is asking you to develop an emotional relationship with this product. And one that is like really, really weepy and really sort of overblown in its own way. I mean, the other problem is they're good. Greta Gerwig did a really good job with these emotional sequences. They're really genuinely affecting, and sort of, I think the desire of Barbie to be real. Now I'm going to go off on a whole other tangent here. I don't know if I've talked about it on the show before, but I really like the movie Blonde. I'm not Mr. Kino. I'm not Mr. Cinema. I don't see so many movies a year, but sometimes I'll see a movie because it has, I liked Andrew Dominik's. I liked The Assassination of Jesse James by the Cower of Robert Ford, so I was excited to see this movie. I know it was by JCO, Joyce Carol Oates, the original book, so, got to support JCO. And it had a lot of backlash, Blonde. People saw it as sort of exploitative or weird or anti-woman in some ways. Like, one of the scenes that people were most offended by is there's a scene from inside Marilyn's vagina as a speculum enters it to do an abortion, and its sort of relationship with abortion, like people had, or Marilyn's relationship to her children, or people took issue with. But I don't know. There's lots to be said about it. I'm not a woman. I can't comment on any feminist stuff in it, nor am I a scholar of feminism. But I found the movie great because it's a horror movie. It's a sad movie about being a tulpa. In my view, this is what the movie's about. Or, Marilyn in the Blonde movie is never called, she's always reminding people, I'm not Marilyn Monroe. Like, literally, she's Norma Jean, but she's also, not Marilyn Monroe. She's an actress playing Marilyn Monroe, what's the name of the lady? She's really good. She was in Knives Out. Ana de Armas. Yeah, Ana de Armas is Marilyn Monroe. And, she retains a little of her Hispanic accent, which I think is intentional on the filmmaker's part, because it's always sort of reminding you that this isn't Marilyn, this is Blonde. This is the idea of Marilyn. This is the idea of that sort of innocent, perfect woman who is at once both sort of this virginal, well, not necessarily virginal, but sort of pure entity, or this angelic entity, but also this sort of this sex temptress as well. And throughout the movie, men are just constantly projecting what they want on her. She has no agency. And, this is referred to in Mad Men as well, with the character of Betty Draper, these women who end up becoming sort of infantilized and controlled by men, and sort of the nightmare of that, the nightmare of having no agency. And in Marilyn Monroe's case, in the Blonde movie, like, it feels as like she doesn't exist, and the only way she can assemble some sort of existence for herself is by allowing these men in her life to project what they want onto her. She is a blank in search of meaning for herself, but she can't quite understand what that meaning is. So or the sort of tragedy of this person that is created only to be exploited. In this way, I find it is akin to a character like Laura Palmer or Rei Ayanami from Evangelion, who is this doll and who wants to know what feeling really feels like, but because of this like doll-like nature that she's been given, you know, she can never really even know what wanting meaning is. She wants to want meaning, but she can't, which is very, you know, that's a very interesting thing. And I think Blonde underscores the tragedy of just never having agency and never being able to choose who you are and never being able to really choose death in a way, because Marilyn didn't choose her own death for herself. It was sort of imposed on her. There's this, not having any choice is a fucking nightmare. And for women in the 60s, you know, like Betty Draper, this is really underscored in Mad Men and also in the Blonde movie. And these sort of ideas are refuted in the Barbie movie because Barbie chooses agency. You know, that is sort of the big emotional denouement of the movie, is that Barbie is allowed to choose agency. And that is, honestly, it's beautiful and affecting and genuine and lovely, but it's being used to sell you fucking Barbies. It's so just maddening. You can never have anything pure in this world. You know, there's nothing there. There's always this thing behind it now. So I guess I should also come to another aspect of this, which is selling out. You know, what is the concept of selling out? Nobody cares about selling out anymore. It was this huge preoccupation for Gen X and even, you know, boomers before them. You know, there was this big concern with, man, I'm never going to join the establishment. You know, what do I do? You know, the preternatural never selling out guys like Ethan Hawke in Reality Bites or something like that. He's very sexy in that movie, Ethan Hawke. But millennials and, you know, fucking Gen Z, you know, it's like they'll do their woke YouTube videos, and then they'll have the ads in the middle. It's like, support is my sponsor. Here's the sponsor, and everyone acknowledges it because, you know, you live in capitalism. You're making, you know, media money. You know, you got to do ads. You do the ads. You got to do the YouTube ad. It's fine. No one will judge you for it. They'd be assholes for judging you for it. I agree. They would be assholes for judging you for it. But there's a line. You know, you don't do the ads for Lockheed Martin. You know, there's some ads you still can't do. We still retain a concept of selling out to some degree. Only the bar has been put much higher, you know, in some ways. But I think it's the reason for it is because obviously it's just a lot harder to not sell out now. Stuff was just way cheaper for people in the 90s, for boomers and for Gen X people. They could afford to, you know, live a life where they could abdicate that sort of luxury, or not, you know, work for the corporate heater. There were more options to do that. It seems like, maybe I'm wrong about that, but nowadays it's just like, no, there's no way you can get out of it. You know, we're all part of the superstructure, right? You know, we're all buying shit off of Amazon. We're all using Amazon Web Services. There's no escape from it, so it's fine. But it's not really. We know deep in our heart we'd rather not be forced to do this. If it were an option, I would rather have the option of not having to do ads, or I don't do ads. I've been thinking of doing them, but I always find it difficult. And I've had the luxury. I have had money that I've been coasting off of for a while that allows me to not do that. And that's I would never judge you for doing ads, or of course it depends on the ad. Don't do the Lockheed Martin ads, but don't do the Raytheon ads. But yeah, no one, if you're a creator and you don't have access to do whatever you want. Do the corporate ad campaigns, do whatever you do what you need to survive. The world is fucking harsh and terrible, and you deserve money for being able to practice your art in any capacity. So, to a limit. Don't do Lockheed. Don't do the weapons. Don't do Dow Chemical if you can help it. Try not to do Dow Chemical if you can help it. And so, I think that idea of selling out has gone away. But at the same time, our awareness of political reality has increased as well, which is very interesting as well. And I think it's sort of emblematic in this movie, which is this shining beacon of woke capitalism, because it's always the executive character, Will Ferrell, who in the previous movie that was a 2.5-hour ad, the Lego Movie, also played a business executive. But in this movie, the executives are good guys. They want to, in some ways, they want to restore the order of the Barbie world, or they're not really taken to they are taken to task. They're lampshading. They say a bunch of men run this company, and eventually they're not really villains in the end. No one's really villains in the end. There's nothing. It's not a movie that wants to criticize this thing too much because it still wants you to buy stuff. Everyone is okay ultimately in the end. You're okay. Buying Barbie is okay. So, I don't know if we'll, develop a sense of selling out again, or a sense of conviction of selling out as big as Gen X or boomers had it. But I don't know, maybe a little more skepticism towards stuff like this is warranted. Maybe we shouldn't all just go embracing these things, even if they are brilliantly executed. Maybe it is sort of a loss for our general artistic oeuvre that we just accept ads as art now. But I guess if you use your whole ass and you do a really, really good ad, it doesn't matter anyway. That's what's interesting about the movie. It's constantly trying to sell you Barbies, but it's always, at one point, the Sasha kid lampshades the fact that it's a white Barbie by saying, "Oh, it's white savior Barbie" in the movie. And it's like, we get it. That's something you would have gotten criticized on, but you called attention to it in the movie through your Hispanic child character. So that means it's good. It's good you called that before critics got to it. Lampshading. It's all lampshading throughout the movie. You can forgive any problematic aspects if you draw attention to them. You can forgive any problematic aspects if you draw attention to them. Another huge demographic beyond adult women who are represented by the America Ferrera character and the tween girls who have maybe outgrown Barbie, who are being sought after for this movie. It's also men. This movie is a huge demographic bomb in that this has potentially opened up this whole new market for Barbie merchandise that wasn't there before. I've seen plenty of guys buying the "I am Kenough" t-shirts. I've never before seen straight men buy Barbie merch. This is an amazing, in terms of an ad, it's the greatest ad ever made, honestly. And I guess I'm just blown away by that. I'm blown away by the craft of it, in some respects, because it really effectively executed what it set out to do, which was make it so that everyone felt okay buying Barbie merchandise. That's what's That's what's really interesting about it, too, is that it's this big... From the very beginning of the movie, it says feminism, right? And the movie is explicitly about feminism and equal rights and sort of the difference between the fantasy version of it that Barbie purports and the cognitive dissonance, as they say, in the real world of trying to live as a woman, where there are all these sorts of strange countervailing expectations for you that you can never quite live up to or be perfect enough. And, you don't have agency, that's the bigger conflict of Barbie's story, is that as a woman, you don't have as much agency necessarily as you would be if you had been born a man. And, that because it's taken away from you. Society, as the movie says, patriarchy didn't go away. They just got better at hiding it, which, is true. It's true to some degree. I agree with the movie. The movie says a lot of political things that I happen to agree with, so that's what the movie is about. But the movie is also, in its own way, about sort of empowering men as well, or empowering, whatever little boy or whatever, adult man would watch this movie, feels invested in these Ken characters because they have this sort of relatable goofiness to them, and often they have the funniest bits in the movie. Like the Ken War is really fucking funny. that's and like really well shot too. There's this astonishing 360-degree shot during the Ken War. It's like really, man, Greta Gerwig really put her whole fucking ass into this, and it seems like she genuinely gives a shit about Barbie, which is, I think, why the movie works so well. Even if it is this exploitative emotional thing, I think it seems like she genuinely believes in this emotional connection you can have through generations of women through this weird, fantasy doll. Through this little piece of plastic, somehow you are connected to women worldwide, and not just women, but men through this doll have as seen through the eyes of women, and it talks in this sort of female gaze capacity. I'm not qualified to talk about male gaze or female gaze, but even though female gaze isn't really a thing, I don't listen to me. But they say that in the movie, Ken is only something in Barbie's gaze. He only means something in Barbie's gaze, which I think is a direct reference to male gaze or female gaze. Why wouldn't it be? Because it's, the movie is already chock full of feminist lingo. And then Ken eventually discovers that, his identity isn't more to anybody, but rather he can choose life for himself. In many ways, he has the same arc as Barbie, is that you sort of need to go through this dark night of the soul, or experience this sadness or existential doubt, and really, in order to create meaning or an identity for yourself or some sort of true reality, and I think this is a powerful, resonant message that they pull off really well, and I think works for whatever boy would be watching the movie as well. I think they would. It's taken less seriously than Barbie's story, but it's still, he's given an arc. The character is likable. He says funny things. You enjoy it. So that's the Ken part of the movie, which is fine. So there are precedents to this. I mentioned the Lego movie before as this 2.5 hour ad, but the Lego movie, to its credit, never... I mean, it does have an emotional moment with, like, Will Ferrell and a kid relating, but that's the one time the movie gets really serious. And that's also the one time in the Lego movie that the insidiousness of the premise becomes inherent, when it is, when the little piano plinks come in and we are relating to each other through products. We love our products. Yeah. Yeah, and I love the Lego movie too, but I think as I look back on it, especially through the lens of this movie, I don't know, I sort of see the the dark underlying nature of this entire thing. Before Barbie, just the plot in general, it bears certain similarities to the Disney movie Enchanted, in which a Disney princess enters the real world and then slowly discovers the fact that she wants agency over fantasy. And so I don't know if that was a direct influence on this, but that seems to be sort of the big marketing push for, like, okay, how do we recontextualize this Disney princess shit for, like, an audience of women and girls that are sort of savvy to their own exploitation now. Lampshaded. So Enchanted sort of invented that in a way. It's like, how do we recontextualize this Disney princess shit in order to make it okay for people that might otherwise find it anti-feminist or find it disempowering. It's just, as long as we acknowledge that it can be anti-feminist or disempowering, people will say, it's like, I know it's bad, but they said they knew they were bad, so it's okay for me to like it. It's all this shell game constantly of trying to distract you from the fact that you're being sold something other than the pure communication of art. You're being sold a Funko Pop. You're being sold Heinz baked beans. You're being sold, Dow Chemical. I mean, it's not as bad as Dow Chemical, but yeah, that I think is what, and I can't, say that Barbie isn't art. I'm not going to make that claim, but it comes damn close to, going across that line of, really removing itself from the auspices of art by having that ulterior motive. The reason we want you to feel all of this emotion, all of this sense of agency, all of this swelling pride at the idea of being connected to women and, being able to choose your own path. And there's also a sequence where they retake over the Supreme Court, which is sort of this fantasy, but also this very sad, mockery of the real world. They changed the Constitution again, which I'm sure is, I'm sure some of this was at least partially inspired by Dobbs. The Dobbs decision. To talk about the Dobbs effect, there's passages in the Barbie movie devoted to it. That's how. And of course, why shouldn't it be this, horribly traumatic thing for women? Why wouldn't it be expressed in this movie that is this supposed to be hawking this mainstream portrayal of womanhood? So it's still art. I don't want to detract from you, but it's also just kind of a fucking ad. It's not really art because it's not really designed to communicate. It is, but it's more designed to solve a problem, which is, how do we get these young goth girls, these adult women and men to buy Barbie products? And Greta Gerwig solved this problem in astounding, virtuosic fashion. But I don't know. It still kind of makes me uneasy. I'm sure if it doesn't make you uneasy, that's fine. I'm not judging you if you can accept this fully. I'm sure there are many counter arguments to this. But I've been sort of thinking about this for a while. I just can't get it off my mind. Why have we accepted these products into our hearts? Don't we want stories unmoored from products? Can't we have stories unmoored from products? It's, on the other side of it, you had Oppenheimer this year, which I haven't seen, which is a story unmoored from a product. It was the other side of the Barbenheimer coin. So I suppose, that was good. I'm happy it made a lot of money for a movie that's sort of long, boring, and talky. I should see it. I'm sure it's good. And I'm sure it has less of that. No one's going out to buy Oppenheimer Funko Pops. Actually, I don't know about that. They might release an Oppenheimer Funko Pop, which is very disturbing to me. But I think it's safe to say that the movie isn't explicitly designed to sell you Oppenheimer Funko Pops in the way that the Barbie movie is designed to sell you Barbie Funko Pops. So, you know, that's a lot of what I've been thinking lately about this goddamn sellout culture. You know, it's not so bad. You know, I'm not denigrating anyone for participating in it. This is the world now. You know, you gotta do this shit. But, you know, still makes me fucking uncomfortable.